My mouth tasted of penny-bright fear as I stood behind the lectern, fingers aching where I clenched the pitch cards. The Severine Hall lights burned too hot on my face. Rows of grey-suited investors watched, arms folded, lips curled as I tried to describe what I saw in my head, a place the city hadn't imagined yet, something alive with colour and scent, a restaurant that wasn't just food but a story you could taste. I stammered, my tongue tangled itself into knots. A cuisine rooted in memory, I said, inspired by my grandmother's garden outside Marseille and the corner bistros from my first years in Paris. I paused, breath shuddering. They exchanged a look, a silent execution of hope. I pushed on, trying to sketch the vision, not the menu: seasonal produce, little-known herbs, an open kitchen glowing with warmth, a place where you could eat happiness by the mouthful. A woman in the second row, hair ruthlessly sculpted, raised her hand. "Excuse me, M. Gerard, do you have a business plan or simply nostalgia?" Soft laughter, knives sheathed in velvet. I flushed, my voice shrank. "There's a plan." With projected margins and words slipped like fish from my grasp. The PowerPoint flickered, but the numbers meant nothing next to their skepticism, their polite contempt. The clock's hands moved slow as syrup. Afterward, silence. Chairs pushed back, eyes averted. The panel thanked me for my passion and ushered in a startup promising meal kits with drone delivery. I packed up, each slip of paper a rebuke. Weeks later, the rejection email arrived, nearly blank in its refusal. My uncle was the first to make a joke about it. Over Sunday lunch under the Palace Bright chandelier and my aunt's lemon tart, he said, "So the prodigal chef returns. Will you revolutionize leftovers next?" Laughter scattered down the table. My cousins, parents, and even Camille, whom I once thought might understand. When I tried to answer, my father cut in, "We're proud you tried, Paul, but perhaps it's time to consider something more stable. Management, maybe." Stability. That word was a prison built of good intentions. After, in the dark corridor, Camille touched my hand. "You could always teach, or open a small place in Marseille like your mother's friends did." Her tone was gentle, as if I were easily breakable. My mouth was too dry for anger, but inside it simmered, stripes of heat on my heart. Am I so laughable? I left the apartment before dessert, walking the city at dusk, pushing through tourists and old men with cigarettes at their lips. Paris felt indifferent, lights blinking, river moving, lovers kissing under bridges. I wandered past kitchen doors, let the smell of baking bread and garlic braise fill my lungs. The city offered nothing, not even pity. For a year, I went restaurant to restaurant. Some let me stage for a week, some barely looked at my CV. Too odd, they said, too dreamy. My anger curdled into airless silence. I took prep shifts, endless mountains of carrots to peel, crates of onions to chop, burns blossoming on my wrists. All the grand ideas suffocated in steam and discipline. But on nights when the others left for drinks and I was alone, I experimented. I scavenged bits, wild thyme from the edge of Buttes-Chaumont, half a loaf of pain de campagne. One night the sous chef left a crate of bruised apricots on the counter, destined for the bin. I roasted them with honey and lemon verbena until they collapsed, collapsing myself onto the prep table as their scent flooded my veins. For a few moments I was back in my grandmother's orchard, sunlight catching her white hair, her laughter in the air as she pressed a fruit into my palm. Sometimes I wept quietly so no one would see. Sometimes I took furious notes, trying to trap flavors like butterflies on pinned cards. It was after one of these nights that Ramai, the dishwasher, found me, face streaked with sweat. "That smells better than anything I've tasted here in months," he said simply. He ate what I handed him, the apricots on toasted bread with curds of fresh chèvre, closing his eyes at the first bite. "You should open a place," he said, voice low, serious, unconcerned with the impossibility. "I tried," I said. He shrugged. "Try again, not for them, for us." The thing about hunger, if you feed it, it grows braver. I began to save. Every euro I could spare, tucked into an envelope behind a torn poster in my flat. I sold my record collection, my wristwatch, some of my grandmother's plates, her gift, if I convinced myself she'd want it that way. Eventually I found a space. It even smelled wrong, walls scabbed with old grease, window clotted with grime. But it was cheap and off Rue Oberkampf, close enough to the markets but easy to miss. I slept on the floor for a month, washing the tiles, scrubbing away the years. The first morning, with the windows open, sun pouring over the battered steel, I heard birds and distant traffic and believed for a moment that I could win. But doubt is patient. It waited, curled in shadows for every misstep. I burned bread. I cut my palm so badly I nearly fainted from pain. The first supplier I hired delivered spoiled spinach, then vanished with half my deposit. My fingers ached, and my teeth ground themselves to needles every night as I cooked alone for the imagined faces of my family, my city, the world. Still, I cooked. I created dishes from scraps from longing. Mackerel with sorrel and charred fennel, clean, sharp, a memory of summer storms over the sea. Goat's cheese ravioli with mint and pine nuts, delicate as dusk. Apricots again, caramelized this time, dripping over homemade yogurt and toasted black bread. I changed the menu weekly, sometimes daily, hunting for something truer in each plate. Most days, only a handful of seats filled. My sign was hand-painted, the lettering not quite straight. Reviewers overlooked me, except for one spare line on a blog from a woman with a poet's tongue. There is a gentleness here beneath the wild flavors, and a fierce tenderness. Still, the city didn't care. I couldn't see the end. Rent gobbled my savings, my debts paced my dreams. Some nights too tired to stand, I'd pour a glass of wine and imagine what my uncle would say if he saw me, alone, fillet knife glinting above the sink. Then one slow Thursday a man came in, old, coat patched at the elbows, eyes bright as cider. He ordered 3 courses, finished every bite. Before leaving he pressed a card into my hand, SB Michelin. I laughed out loud, scaring a couple near the window. The world felt suddenly possible, as if the pieces didn't quite fit, but I could nudge them together. A month passed, nothing. The Michelin man vanished into rumor. But then a young couple, eyes wide, came in asking for the ravioli, the one from the review. There was no review, not that I knew, but whispers spread, neighbors, bloggers, friends of friends. I found a note on my window. Your place saved our anniversary. Another, careful handwriting, Maury Sorrel, please. Reservations trickled in. I hired Ramai as my first commie. He showed up every morning at 6, shuffling in his work boots, whistling as though he'd already won the lottery. We're going to need bigger pots, he joked, looking at the pathetically small saucepan I'd been using since school. Summer passed, autumn bled gold into the city. The lines grew longer, the faces more familiar. I wrote to my parents once simply, doing well, my father replied in the same vein. At Christmas, they sent a box of cigars, strictly forbidden by my insurance, and a bottle of vermouth. No word about food, about Paris. That silence hurt more than all the early mockery, but I carried it with the rest, a stone in my pocket smoothed by turning over. Then in February Michelin called, 1 star. For an hour I sat on the floor and let the news move through me like water. The anger had cooled, replaced by something cold and clean, serenity maybe, or just exhaustion. That night when I arrived at family dinner, the air was tense. My aunt's eyebrows rose, my uncle looked everywhere but at me. My mother poured wine with trembling fingers. I waited, breathing in thyme and garlic, letting their familiar voices wash over me. Finally, after the meal, my father cleared his throat. We heard, he said, fixing me with the same stare he used when I spilled soup on the new rug at age 9. Congratulations, it's something. Camille toasted, her smile uncertain. My uncle recovered himself first. A restaurant star, perhaps you'll be cooking for our mayor soon, eh? He winked. I tasted the bitterness like burnt coffee. That night, walking home along the Seine, I leaned on the stone balustrade and let the wind tug at my coat. The gilded bridges gleamed. I watched boats shuttle tourists through the dark, the city's bones ancient and indifferent beneath our passing ambitions. For the first time in years I felt neither anger nor contentment, just a strange peace, the city's hum a song in my veins. The restaurant grew. I hired another cook, Claire, and a server, Amadou, whose laughter softened even the sourest customer. We replaced the crooked sign. I painted the chairs myself, turquoise and ochre, filling the place with light. Soon the local press took notice. Le Figaro ran a photo of me, flour dusted on my apron, standing over a plate of roasted artichokes, the chef who refused to quit. Strangers began to ask for selfies. Lines formed every night, voices echoing through the chilly courtyard. Still, I worked the line, sweating each sauce, redoing plates I found even slightly imperfect. I didn't want crowds or even prestige. I wanted the taste of joy, crisp and surprising, in each dish, the sense that for a moment a stranger and I shared a secret. The letters came then, old friends asking for seats, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years requesting birthday tables. One evening, as Paris thickened with spring, Camille wrote to say she was moving back, her job contract in London done. We met at a sidewalk cafe, as foreign to each other as tourists. She laughed at the menu, sipped her coffee as buskers played Vivaldi nearby. I read the articles, she said, searching my face. It's good what you're doing. Thank you, I said, not quite believing it. She reached across, touching my fingers lightly. I never should have doubted, she murmured, but you seemed so stubborn, like you'd break yourself before you'd bend. I looked away, the hurt still alive. Maybe I did, I said. But I also learned how to stand up again even when no one sees you. She smiled quietly, eyes shining. And how does it feel? I inhaled, scented air full of rain, coffee, cigarettes, croissant. Like standing at the top of a long staircase, the view is beautiful but your legs still ache. The reopening party was my idea, a 1-year anniversary, a thank you for each doubter, well-wisher, and accidental believer. I sent invitations to everyone who'd ever scoffed or shrugged, my uncle, parents, the investors who'd watched my first pitch flop, old colleagues and bloggers. The city's doubt would gather under my turquoise eaves. I cooked for days, old dishes and new ones, mixing memories with risk. Sardines on grilled toast with lemon and wild fennel, rabbit braised with apricots and rosemary wine, goat cheese beignets, charred leeks, black pepper ice cream, strawberries roasted with tarragon and honey. None of it apologetic, all of it heart exposed. As the hour approached, my hands trembled. I composed my face in the kitchen's battered steel reflection. My chef circled, nervous, whispering in corners. Then the guests arrived. My uncle first, awkward in a too-large suit, his wife trailing, lips pinched. Investors, now softened with age and alcohol, murmured appreciative noises as they sat. My parents, arriving late, faces pale, eyes wide. Camille finally, alone, her dress bright as late summer peaches. Through the open kitchen, the one I'd dreamed of on that long-ago pitching stage, I saw their faces as dishes came out, each plate a question and an answer. I watched their mouths move, eyes widen, laughter ripple through quiet. My uncle's dismissive smirk faded as he dug into the rabbit. My father murmured something to my mother, his fork resting on the table, unmoving. The investors snapped photos on their phones, pointing, whispering. Halfway through the meal, I stepped out. The restaurant, usually background to my work, pulsed with a different energy, the knowledge passing table to table that this, finally, was real. I stood at my family's table, nerves buzzing under my skin. My mother rose, fists clenched, and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. My father set his hand on my shoulder. I looked at my uncle, waiting for the other shoe, the old sarcasm, the lazy putdown, but he met my eyes, shrugged, and lifted his glass. You were right, he said, voice barely above the restaurant's hush. I'm glad I was wrong. Joy came then, not loud, not boastful, but clean, precise as salt. The serenity I'd built meal by meal, anguish by anguish, had solidified beneath my ribs. People always talk about revenge, about proving them wrong, but standing there, tasting the air thick with rosemary and smoke and pride, and the scent of what I built, I understood. The returns aren't measured in their apologies. It's in the meals shared, the tired, happy smiles at closing, the little notes from strangers. In the community that builds itself, stubborn and beautiful, around the things we love. That night, after the last guests had faded into the luminous Paris dark, I lingered by the open door. Remai swept crumbs into a careful pile. Clea counted glasses, humming softly. From the corner, Camille beckoned. I sat beside her, breath steady as the distant bells. Now what? She asked, not teasing. I smiled, heart loud as thunder. Now, I said, we cook, and we keep the door open. Dreams can be mockery, or they can be bread, shared, cracked open, fed to those who doubted you until wonder coats their tongues. I stood, let the air of Paris fill my lungs, the anger there, a memory now, seasoning instead of poison, serenity at last, hardened and worthy. We began to clean, the city's lights winking in approval, the dream no longer ridiculous but real, ripe, sharp, and ours.